quote. I'm going to start off with asking you about something that George Bernard Shaw said,
Right.
which is opera is when a tenor and a soprano want to make love but are prevented to doing so by a baritone. What would you say to George Bernard Shaw if given a chance to respond to his comment?
You mean in general or about Don Carlo precisely?
In general.
In general.
We'll get to Don Carlo in a minute.
I would say to George Bernard Shaw, I'm sure he would appreciate this quote that we say a lot in the business, which is opera is when a tenor and a soprano want to make love on stage, but often the soprano makes love with the baritone backstage. The real quote is the tenor and soprano fall in love on stage, but the soprano usually goes home with the baritone. That's the real. It's a real quote, and it's not entirely true, but it's been known to happen more than the two partners actually hitting it off of stage.
Right, because what are the odds of that actually being real?
It's it's true for every kind of relationship. Truly, the amount of times you walk in, you have a month, 2 months to make friends with people. Most times you don't know them, and the fact that we open up, we know quickly that we have to play together, play along, but the amount of times that we actually do become friends is pretty rare.
Right.
Some friendships do happen, but they're rarer than just colleague ships.
Right. Well, let's talk about Don Carlos, which I love that the Met decided to add an S to it to make it seem different.
Well, it's also Verdi. Unfortunately, it's if you coming from Italian, you spend your whole night going Carlo, blah blah, and then in Italian, in French, you have to sing Carlos, and with the accent on the last syllable, so it does change everything. That one S.
Well, of course. So, what pleasure does singing this opera in French give you that singing it in Italian did not or could not?
Well, actually, to sum it up, is that I've always seen all those nuances and everything that's written on the page, and have tried to do them as best I could, and succeeded fairly. But then in French, what's amazing is that it just works. You don't have to put any effort into it. You do it and you go, oh, that's why it's written like this, because you wrote it in French. So that's why you put the pianissimo on that note, or that's why this high note has this vowel, So it's just that it makes more sense. In Italian, you had to make sense of it, and in French, it already makes sense.
Does that make it easier to sing?
Yeah, it makes it easier to sing, but it also makes it easier to understand, not just for us, for the audience too. Like, things are clearer. The text is clear. The intentions are clearer. Sometimes that with Don Carlos, I find that the problem is the drama is confusing. They already tried to clean that up. David McVicker and Yannick Nézet-Séguin together, by choosing from which version they were going to take. Because it's by the end of the night, you're like, I heard amazing music and I heard beautiful singing, but what's the story? Sometimes he gets dragged, Don Carlos gets dragged into the tomb by his ancestor who came back from the dead. Sometimes he just gets shot on stage, and so you're like, what? Why? We don't understand. So they really cleaned it up so that especially the politics of it was much clearer.
Well, why is it the long operas are always the ones that are most convoluted?
Well, I think that's the whole point, isn't it? They're like, let's make this as long and as complicated as we can. You have to understand it from the going back in time when they were writing them. Like, these people had nothing like we do to change their minds, they couldn't just turn on a machine in their living room. So when they finally got the time to dress up and to go to the opera, it was like a 6-hour-long business, and more. So the Opera Paris was made every opera that was written for l'Opéra Paris needed to have a minimum of 5 acts and a ballet. And then the only problem when Verdi wrote it was that the opera was too long, because they were missing, the people would have to catch the last train, and the last train was at midnight 35, something like that. So he had to shorten it enough so that people had time to go catch the last train. But he had written even longer than what we're doing.
Well, I guess there's an irony with that story, given that Don Carlos is playing at the same time as Ariadne of Naxos, where a composer's work is shortened because it was going to be too long for the people.
That's right. No, not just shortened, but let's have both pieces of entertainment play at the same time. Like, I mean, that's actually pretty genius on Strauss's part to write those two things together.
It is. It also makes me wonder what drugs he was on to try to combine.
And can I have some?
There's that too. So you mentioned that there's more clarity with it being in French. It's more easily understood. Are there any other ways in which this opera, with the language change, impacts the overall experience that the audience is going to have?
Well, I guess it depends on how well you know the opera. I guess, if it depends to see what kind of state of mind you're in. So if you're someone, because I mean, I always say that about opera lovers. Because I include myself in there, we tend to be quite conservationist. Conservationist. Can you say that? Conservatists. We're conservatists. Can we say that?
Yeah, you can say that. I know what you're saying.
We like things the way we know them. I've always heard this duet or this aria, this ensemble this way, conducted this way, staged like that. And so it's really hard for anyone to come up with something new. Conductors changing tempi, they get criticized. A singer changing a high note, he gets criticized. So I think what's interesting is that in this case we're not changing what Verdi wrote. We're using what Verdi wrote. So no one can really go like, oh, I prefer it the way I'm used to it, because at the same time it's like, well, Verdi did write this. We're not making it up. But it's not easy for everyone to listen to the famous Don Carlo Rodrigo duet in French. They're used to hearing Dio che nell'alma in fondo, with the breathing in the certain places and with the long notes in the place, blah blah blah. So it's all of the 4 hours and 30 minutes of opera that they're gonna sit through. They have to keep an open mind. So I think what the French triggers is perhaps the sense that you're hearing it for the first time. And if you do have that open mind, then it's wonderful. Then you're like, oh my God, I've never heard this opera this way before. The King's Aria, which I adore. You've never heard it. If you've never heard it in French, it's like listening to it for the first time again. And remember the first time you heard that aria in Italian, it's one of the most beautiful things ever written.
Right.
And so you probably were very emotional. So by singing it in a different language, a language that Verdi wrote, that he composed onto it, it allows you to rehear it for the first time, to possibly re-experience that first time experience of the initial moment you actually heard this. So I find that it's just interesting for that, but I know it's not easy for everybody to open up their mindset to that. They'd rather judge, oh, my version that I have that I listen to is what I prefer.
Right, but am I correct in assuming that French was your first language?
It is my first language, yes.
So,
but I did get to know Don Carlo in Italian first, though.
Right, but Yannick speaks French. You speak French.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, does that musical language fit more comfortably into who you are as an artist, and does it allow you to bring a different perspective than this perspective you have when you're performing it in Italian?
Yeah, it does, but not necessarily. I mean, interestingly, not necessarily musically. I mean, yes, because of the nuances, and I was saying that earlier, it is true that it makes more sense. But I think it makes more sense generally. I don't think it makes more sense just for me or just for Yannick because that's our first language. I think it's just because that's the way he wrote it. As a musician, it makes more sense. You know what I mean? Like, it's a language we speak as well. Music. I think it makes more sense musically. Now, that said, the French language does help me understand the second and third layers of situations that I had never really quite grasped before. My first aria, for example, it can be very boring. It might still be, I don't know, but it's 2 verses of the same music. And basically the entire goal of this aria is to convince the queen to have a meeting with Don Carlos. That's all I'm doing. But I never understood how every word is carefully chosen so that it would make sense for the queen to accept this invitation, because she's in front of everybody else and people talk. It's court, right? So everyone will talk if she says yes. So I have to choose my words. I have to plead enormously, so that even the people around her have to go to her and say, you should really meet this guy. Otherwise, if she makes a decision, yes, I'll meet him, like that, just out of the blue, people will start talking. So it's very interesting how I get to play with those words so much better in the French, even though I do speak Italian. But when I sing the Italian, it's so poetic, and the inversions of the lines are it's so intricate to be fitting the music, that I feel like I'm losing this sense that the whole time my character is talking on a second degree, you know?
Right.
And I think that's lost in the translation, because they had to make every word fit the musical line. So instead of fitting the music on the words, they did the opposite, and it didn't allow them to have these layers of understanding.
Now, I would try to name the duet, but I would butcher the French, which I'm not about to do because I speak Spanish. So I'm not even gonna massacre your language. But you do sing about a devotion to the cause of liberty, and I'm wondering what it is like at this particular moment in history to be singing an aria about liberty at a time when obviously part of the world is at war with Ukraine under attack from Russia.
Yeah, it's a recurring theme of mine in the show. It's very interesting. As soon as I started following the developments, I mean, we all did, of Ukraine and Russia, every word that I say just made more sense. Like, it already made sense, in a generic context of war. But if you think of my character as this guy who is following the army, and he goes to Flanders, and he sees what the king and most importantly the church, the Inquisition, he sees what they're doing to those people, because they're not of the same religious belief. They're Protestants, and so the only response that they have is, we kill everyone that doesn't think like us. And boom, immediately we were like, wait, isn't that what Putin was saying? Is that what he was saying? It was like, wait, this country right next to us, they don't think like me, therefore I must crush them. Like, it seemed to me that that's exactly what is happening. And there's this big duet between the king and I, where I confront him directly. I don't even care about my life anymore. I'm just like, what are you doing? And his words, he's very calm about it too. It's like, when you know men the way I do, you'll understand that it's the only way I can bring them peace. And my immediate response is, peace? You're talking about the peace of the cemetery. And when I say that line, the orchestra swells up and does this huge noise, so loud. And so I can't help but think that was Verdi's comment on war,
Well, and it's sad that commentary can still exist today.
It will always exist.
And
men fight.
And is necessary, for that matter.
It is. But I mean, if you set guys like Putin or any, warmonger, Bashar al-Assad or whatever, name it, there's a million that existed in history. If you set them in the audience and showed them that, and explained to them that scene, they wouldn't change a thing about their minds or their lives or the way they do things. They would just be like, well, that's one view, but they truly believe they're right. They would root for the king in this instance. They would say, like, well, what are you saying makes sense. If I want to offer peace to my land, I have to crush anyone who's in the way of that peace. Kill them, eradicate them. That's how they think.
Right. Well, we can go down a big rabbit hole on politics. But so I'm gonna ask something practical. As somebody who has seen multiple Met Live and HD screenings, how intrusive are the cameras for the cast? And also for the audience. I've only been to the Met once, and frankly, that was just last week to see Ariadne off Naxos.
Yeah.
But I just wonder. I mean, there are so many great close-ups, and I've had people say, "Oh my God, it's just so great to see Met Live in HD." And I'm thinking, well, I know what it takes to film things. There's got to be cranes and cameras in all kinds of places that don't necessarily enhance the live experience for the people in the hall or the
That's
cast.
right. I mean, I don't know exactly how I can answer that. I think I have to answer it like a two-part. So the first part, being on stage, they did do a run of the camera work during our dress rehearsal, and they told me during, and I was like, oh right, I couldn't tell. I had no idea, but I did see, like, as I was walking backstage. I'm always on stage in this opera, so I didn't see it often. But as I was walking backstage, I saw this screen, and I could see the result on the screen. I was like, oh, that's interesting. But it being on stage, it never even came into my mind. I never spotted a camera or something. I wasn't thinking about it. And I was sitting in the audience when they did the live stream of Rigoletto. I was there for the last performance. And where I was sitting, there was a crane just above, not me, just I'm in front of me, but just above where I was sitting. I could see the camera moving, but I only noticed it, because I was in the parterre. So I only noticed it when the lights were on, during the intermissions. But I was thinking that if I was sitting, they're really in front of those people, like the people that are on the balconies or the boxes on the side. If you're a certain height, you'll see that arm moving, and that cannot be comfortable, watching an opera, seeing that thing swing up and down. Now, the last part of my answer on this is, it's kind of the same thing and worse of when there are people in the audience that can have an influence on your career. So it depends. It depends on the person. But for some people will be like agents or directors or reviewers, even, although less and less reviewers, I find, thanks to social media.
You mean because
People,
everybody's a reviewer at this point?
exactly. Reviews have exploded into everyone has an opinion. So it's kind of lessened some reviews, but definitely directors, casting directors, of other opera houses, because the opera house in which you work obviously would know about your work because they've seen you rehearse and everything, if they pay attention. So yeah, it triggers that thing where you're on stage and you judge everything you do, and that's wrong. You stop being in the moment. You stop making just the scene come to life and the emotion come to life, because you'll be worried about sometimes really just a gesture you did. It'd be like, oh, I don't know, my arm, I didn't know what to do with my arm, and now everyone in the theater is going to see it, and then that spitballs into your brains, and it takes you out of the character, and you forget something that you were supposed to do in music or in the staging, and so that's wrong. And again, it depends on the performer. So I've never been in a live HD at the Met. I have been in a live HD once in Paris, in the cinemas, and I have to say, I was singing Don Giovanni, and it was the worst time I sang the Vieni alla finestra, the serenade. That was my official worst time. So much so that they had filmed 2 performances, and they changed that singing, that bit, for the other performance they had filmed. And just I think that's the only thing they changed, because it was really bad.
Well, at least they had that to change. I mean, that's good. That's good
right.
that they had it. Well, you bring up
right.
you bring up Don Giovanni. I know that once this production closes, you're going to be doing Eugene Onegin next.
Yeah, in Dallas.
And then you go to San Francisco for Don Giovanni. Yeah. There's certain roles that are obviously part of a baritone's repertoire, but are there any roles that resonate most with you personally? And if so, what would it be?
It changes as you grow, as you change, your life changes. I mean, when I was younger, the 2 roles that I loved singing were Silvio and Figaro in Barbiere, and because they were facets of me. Figaro was me. Walk in a room, start talking, charm everybody. Like, I love doing that. I love to do that, especially before I met my wife, especially when I was uncertain of romantically where my life was heading. I say charming everybody. It didn't have anything to do with women or men. It was just I want to be liked part of thing. And so Figaro is definitely like that. When I sang it the last time, in September, it felt so different, because it felt like I was revisiting a part of my youth. It was very interesting. And Silvio, I don't think I'll sing Silvio again, but I loved singing Silvio because he's so freaking heartbroken. he's got this great love, this woman that he adores, that he sees like as a goddess, and she doesn't want to go with him. And then he's just crushed. He says, "But you told me you loved me," and then eventually she decides she'll go with him. But that moment of just like, but I thought you loved me, like that. That scene, I think, is just phenomenal. It was really a great opera about heartbreak.
Right. So marital bliss has changed your perspective on the roles that most interest you now.
Yeah, marital bliss and being a father, and there's just being older, more mature, I guess. All of a sudden, I'm like, I love singing Posa, because his biggest concern. There's not one moment in this opera where you wonder, is he in love with? Actually, some people think him and Don Carlos are an item. I even want to go further and be like, he's one of those people that I think is asexual. I think it's everything has to do with humans. He likes humans. He wants to save everyone. He's got the Superman complex or something. Anyway, so politics is his love, making sure that the right thing happens. Passion. He's a passionate man. So I think that's really interesting. And again feels a bit like an old me, again, that would have been blinded by his own ego to what's really important. I think we can all relate to that. Some people can still, and some people can just feel, oh yeah, I remember when I was blinded by my own ego to something that would have been really important, and the regret that it can bring. So I think it's a very cool situation to play today as well. Don Giovanni, now that's just like miles ahead, away from me. This is probably the most fun to play now. It's people that I'm not. I am not Don Giovanni. I never was. People think, oh yeah, you were such a seducer. Don Giovanni's not a seducer. He's a taker. If it's not his, it's not anyone's. And I was never like that, like not even close. I was definitely more of Leporello. Like, if she doesn't want me, then fine. But I didn't have that thing where I was idolizing someone. I wanted to be like someone. I was happy to be who I was. But I never wanted to just take, and the number of people didn't matter. It was not about quantity. It was always about quality. So I am millions of years away from Don Giovanni, which is why I like playing. Well, it's so much more fun.
George Bernard Shaw would be very disappointed to hear you make that statement.
About Don Giovanni.
Yeah, about Don Giovanni and not being the taker, because then that blows his whole theory about baritones out of the water. Just to come full circle.
No. It's exactly what he said. On stage, I prevent them.
Yes, that's true. On stage. I was thinking about what happened off stage.
Yes.
Now, I hope we have time for two quick questions.
Absolutely, that's tons of time.
Yeah, great. I know that I look at what you have released in terms of recordings, and I love the fact that it doesn't follow the traditional idea of what a baritone is supposed to record. So, right. given that premise, I'm wondering if any of the songs that you wrote in the first 14 days of the pandemic are going to be amongst the things you record in the future.
I do have the project. I was supposed to do it last summer, and then I got a call in Vienna saying, "We're looking for a Figaro. Can you come now?" And so I had to cancel the whole studio. Everything was settled. The musicians, we were going in the studio. Everything was done. It was going to be the French ones first. I want to do an album with the French ones, an album with the English ones. I'd like to separate them. Mostly because they are very different. Even in my head, I feel different when I sing in English than when I sing in French. And in French, there's something about them that's just so much more personal. Just I want, I said to the friends I was working with, I said, I want something almost nothing. I want guitars, pianos, but like raw. if we can all play at the same time, that's what I want. I don't want to have like a lot of editing, a lot of added stuff. Where the songs in English, I feel could go better in that context, where they would be more worked and electronically assisted, let's say. So yeah, these are definitely plans of mine, absolutely, but they're hard to realize.
No, of course. Well, hopefully it's easier to realize now as the world seems to be getting over the most recent big hump of the
Yeah,
pandemic.
but it's not as easy to realize as it doesn't sell anymore. So there's not a lot of people that are ready to do those projects unless they paid a lot of money. Because even if you said, I'll give you a percentage of it, they'll be like, mm-mm. No one's gonna buy it. I'm like, oh yeah, that's true.
Well, that's when it's time to go on recital tours so you can sell them after the performance.
There you go.
That's the way to make that work. The other thing I want to ask you is something that Verdi said, since we've been talking about Verdi's work. I have striven for perfection. It has always eluded me, but I surely had an obligation to make one more try. Do you feel similarly about your career? And if so, do you think perfection is achievable?
Oh, that's very interesting. No, I don't think perfection is achievable. But I think it's a great goal, and I think people that have obsessed a bit too much about it have definitely either changed career or drowned in their careers. I think one of the hardest thing to do is to strive for perfection and then have the humility to recognize that you did your best, and stop trying to make it what it wasn't. The amount of times I hear people talk about a project they did, and they talk about it like it was. So if it was a great success, they talk about it like it was perfection, and if it wasn't, they talk about it in like everything that was in the way of it being perfection. But how can it not just be what it was? I did in Montreal. We did the Men Walking 9 years ago, 10 years ago, okay, something like that. And it was by far the most successful show I've ever seen in the opera, at l'Opéra de Montréal, and also in my career. There's not one review, one person that had anything bad to say about it. But it wasn't perfect, and I know it wasn't. What was great about it, though, is that there was emotion. So the goal was achieved every night. It wasn't perfection, but people lived something. They experienced something. That's what I think we should aim for. Every time I see a staging where they deconstruct the opera and they take everything out, and you go, okay, but is there still an emotion? Are we going to the theater for a reason, or are we just there to celebrate the fact that you were able to transform something that's been done a certain way for 200 years to transform it into something else? Like anyone can do that. A toddler can do that. It just takes a bit of imagination and means. But in the end, did we go to the theater for a reason? Did we experience something? Did we live something that make us interested in going back? I think that's what we should strive for. But I don't think perfection is attainable, and I think that's okay. Right. I do like that Verdi still says that he still had to try.
Right. Of course,
I think that's a great line.
Well, that is
a great line.
It's like Yoda. There's no try, you do, or whatever the expression is that Yoda does.
No, but it's true. It's true. You do, and you do again, and you do it again, and you do it again. Every night we do a different performance of the same opera. I know exactly where my hand goes when I take the sword out, when I come in, when I come out. And yet, every night when I finish the show, it feels like I sang a different show.
Well, that's good, because if it felt like you sang the same show, you'd get bored very quickly.
Oh, I would be out of this career so fast.
Right. Well, I'm very grateful that we had the time to do this.
Same here. Thank you.
This was a pleasure. Are you all right with my posting this interview on my YouTube channel?
That's absolutely fine. Yeah. I mean,
okay, great.
So this is not my apartment anyway, so people can say whatever they want about the beautiful background.
Well, the artwork, the
lovely artwork,
the minimalist artwork that you have up there.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much. I plan on seeing the live in HD broadcast, and I'm very much looking forward to it.
I hope it's as enjoyable as it is in theater.
I'm sure it will be. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the run.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.